Chapter 4. The true science of colonization is not knowing what planet has the correct mixture of breathable gases or if it has drinkable water. All those things can be made. It relies solely on if the planet in question has a purpose. Nothing can be created from nothing, and everything has an origin. From the First Colony Notes on Mars, author unknown. Hal was poring over the scans of the first planet when the communicator alerted him that the scans of the second planet were ready. He quickly uploaded the information to his console and continued his study of the gas ratios in the first planet's atmosphere. Enoch's voice interrupted his concentration. "Doctor, could I be of some assistance? I believe I can compile a report on the planet's habitation possibility rather quickly." Hal nodded, his weary eyes drooping for lack of sleep. It felt as if it had been days since he slept. "Yes, thank you," he replied with a yawn. "I am so very tired and I feel I will go cross-eyed staring at these reports." Hal uploaded the planet data from his console to the Enoch via a hardline that he had installed to make the communication quicker. Enoch confirmed the information had been successfully integrated into its system and began processing all of the data. Hal slowly marched toward his crude bedroll that he had made for himself in the cargo hold and laid down. He would have been more comfortable in his quarters, but he just couldn't bring himself to be that far away from Enoch and his work. He wanted to be there when all the data was compiled into a workable report for him to read. As he closed his eyes and began drifting off to sleep, he focused on the comforting thrum of Enoch's neutral thermal core. The steady pulsating hum quickly and easily lulled him into a deep sleep. When Hal awoke, he immediately noticed a few things. The first and most obvious was that Enoch's pale blue thermal core was no longer blue, it was a vibrant green. The second thing that he noticed was much more subtle. The deep thrum had stopped. The latter was vastly more worrisome. "Enoch!" he almost shouted, "are you still active?" There was a slight pause, and Hal was about to ask again when Enoch's voice rang out. "Yes, Doctor, I am active." "What happened to you?" Hal asked, a small amount of panic creeping into his voice. "I believe you're referring to the upgrades I made to my construct's core. I now run 42% more efficiently." That was incredibly impressive, Hal thought to himself, but also terrifying for the same reasons. Enoch was making itself better, improving to a level that hadn't been considered. It made him wonder what else it would do in the future. "Enoch, are the planet's habitability reports complete?" he asked as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. "Of course, Doctor. The reports were completed 7 hours and 12 minutes ago. I have provided a full report on both planets to your terminal." 7 hours ago? How long had he been asleep, he wondered. "Excellent," he said as he groggily walked over to his terminal. "How long was I asleep?" "You were asleep for 9 hours and 41 minutes, Doctor. Do you feel refreshed?" Enoch stated calmly. "I was asleep for almost 10 hours. It was less of a question and more of a statement of wonder. He had not slept that long in over a decade. He started wondering if his old age was getting the better of him. "Yes, Doctor, that is correct," Enoch stated. Clearly it did not understand the concept of rhetorical questioning yet. Hal sat down at the terminal and began to read the reports. As he read, he found the interesting points and focused on them. The atmosphere of both planets was exactly 22% oxygen, and the nitrogen was 3% and 5% respectively. The rest of the elements in the atmosphere were not toxic in their minuscule levels and still breathable. It appeared that one of the worlds, which he had dubbed Alpha, was rich in minerals such as iron, graphene, and gold. The second planet, that he called Beta, had a massive deposit of uranium deep in the planet's crust. After a few moments of watching the perspective orbits of both planets, he was able to determine the day-night cycle, which appeared to be approximately 30 hours. Both planets' orbit would bring them in a short range of each other every 148 cycles. This was convenient for supplying 2 colonies and for mining purposes. The better of the 2 planets appeared to be Alpha since it had natural water. Beta had a liquid ocean, but it appeared to be liquid hydrogen at its deepest with water on the surface. He determined that planet Alpha would be the better planet to make contact on. However, his scientific mind was curious, so he asked, "Enoch, based on these reports, which planet would be better to make landfall on first?" Enoch took a moment before responding. Planet Alpha would be the prime candidate for colonization. However, Planet Beta should be the first planet we should make landfall on. Why is that? Hal asked, his curiosity piqued. Because it shows signs of intelligent life, Doctor. Hal felt the blood drain out of his face and a cold chill ran up his spine. He felt as if 100,000 volts of electricity had coursed through him, rooting him to the floor. The hair on the back of his neck was standing on end and his blood ran cold. I need to inform Commander Altus, he said in a wavering voice. It took an impossible amount of effort to get his legs working to propel him down the hall. When they did start moving, he couldn't stop them. He was running like a madman down the hallway towards the bridge, very narrowly missing crew members as he ran. The bridge was quiet for once as all the deck officers went about their duties in silence. Commander Altus was looking through the viewport at a small greyish speck in the distance, wondering to himself what could be in store for him down there. Lost in his thoughts, he hadn't even noticed the door to the bridge open and a haggard-looking Dr. Bondi rush through. He ran across the bridge until he was at the foot of the command throne. Dr. Bondi, what is the matter with you? Altus asked, sudden concern clouding his face. You look terrible. The doctor took a moment to catch his breath, bent at the waist with his hands on his thighs. His breathing was labored with exertion and his face was pale, as if he had seen a ghost. When he finally had enough breath to speak, his words came in ragged, catchy spurts. Planet Beta. It has life on it, the doctor said through sharp inhalations. Slow down, doctor. Catch your breath. Altus said, standing from his throne and moving to grab a chair for the old doctor. He appeared as if he may lose consciousness at any moment, and Altus was afraid he may do just that. Altus bade the doctor to sit and catch his breath, assisting him down into the chair. Start from the beginning. What do you mean there is life on Planet Beta? The doctor took a large swig of water that a deckhand offered him and looked Altus in the eyes. The long-range scans, they picked up signs of life on Planet Beta. We are not alone out here. Altus took a step back and crossed his arms over his chest. Did Enoch pick this up? He asked, no longer attempting to hide his concern. Yes, the doctor replied. That and so much more. We must get word back to terra firma, Altus said flatly as if that were the end of it. How? A new voice chimed in. Sergeant Salg appeared from behind Altus, his face showing no emotion as always. How would you recommend we send word back? We are too far past the limits of our communication relays. Unless we turn tail and run back, I don't see how we could. Altus looked back out the viewport and stared at the small grey planet in the distance. He felt the weight of all eyes on the bridge boring holes into him. We make for the planet. Bring all scanners online and operational at full capacity. All crew to battle stations in the eventuality this turns hostile. I want everyone on high alert. Altus sat in this command throne and tapped a few keys, enabling a ship-wide broadcast. Attention crew of the Terran Pride, this is Commander Gering Altus. He spoke into the comlink. We are about to venture into an unknown region of the void. All crew are to be on high alert. There is a possibility of intelligent life on the planet we are approaching. We will maintain battle-ready discipline until otherwise instructed. All hands to your station to await orders. Bridge out. He closed the communication channel with a flick of his fingers, a staunch determination set across his features. Doctor, he said looking down at the doctor seated in front of him. I need you up here. Can you interface Enoch to the bridge? It would be incredibly helpful to have it up here instead of sitting locked away in the cargo hold. The doctor slowly nodded and said, I believe I can, but what would you have Enoch do? The commander considered his next words very carefully before he spoke them. Doctor, that construct can calculate in a matter of seconds what would take us weeks to do. If you, or anyone else on this ship could do that, I would have them up here instead. The doctor nodded in agreement. As you wish. He said, rising to his feet. Give me an hour and it will be done. With that he strode from the bridge. Sergeant Salg, Altus said, turning to face his bridge sergeant. Get your men ready in the unfortunate case that we have boarders. Aye, sir. Salg replied. As he left the bridge he was already barking orders into his comlink. Altus let out a sharp breath and sat back in his command throne. It had been many years since he had been in a situation where combat may be an option, but he knew his role. Everyone on this ship knew their role. What he didn't know was how this possible threat would react to them. Chapter 5. The dynamics of void faring are difficult enough. Throw in the chaos of battle on top of it. It's enough to leave a brave man in real fear for his life. From the memoirs of Major Loren Salg. Hal worked furiously, making connections and running massive cables to the main terminal in the cargo hold. Enoch, if I connect you to the main terminal, you will have access to the entire ship and be able to reach the bridge. He had gotten used to talking out loud to the thin air. At first it had been a little odd and made him feel a touch crazy. Now it was just like speaking to another person. Another person he couldn't see. He had decided not to think about it too hard because the mental gymnastics needed to make the logic work made his head spin. That is correct, Dr. Bondi. However, I will need to have access to a speaker or comlink system to be able to speak with you. Enoch replied in her typical easy and calm tone. Hal slid the data cable into the terminal and rotated into place until it clicked and locked into place. You should be able to make access now, he said, wiping the grease off his hands onto his pants. I am in the ship's main data stream now and have full access. Enoch's voice boomed from the communication speakers in the cargo this time instead of the implanted speakers in the control console under the construct. That was fast. Hal whispered under his breath. It was very fast, Doctor, 0.051 seconds to be precise. Enoch sounded proud of itself, Hal noted. Doctor, I may have an item that may be of help as well. What would that be? Hal asked, his curiosity outweighing his nerves. A pale green light emanated from what Hal had started calling the eye of the construct. It pulsed onto the floor for a moment and Hal could see an object taking shape. After a few moments the light retreated back into the construct and an object was left on the floor. Hal walked over to it and picked it up. It was a small, thin, metallic crown with two prongs pointed down and a small bulge over the left side of the crown slightly off-center. It didn't feel flimsy by any means, but was also light and gentle. What is it? Asked Hal as he turned the metal ring around in his hands. It is a personal communication helm that is linked directly to me. It will allow you to have access to me anywhere. Hal heard it this time, a sense of pride in Enoch's voice when it answered. Hal held the device in his hands, shocked and amazed. It goes on your head, Enoch said sarcastically. Hal placed the device on his head and it slipped into place perfectly. The downward-facing prongs fell into place over his ears and Hal had to admit that it fit him as if it had been tailor-made for him. Wait, he thought. It was tailor-made for him. This raised a lot of new questions, but this was not the time. He had work to do. Enoch's voice sounded directly in his ears this time. Doctor, this helm will also allow you to see my direct data feed. While Enoch spoke, the helm opened a small holovid over his left eye which displayed a scrolling data feed. This is incredible. I have so many questions for you, but there is no time right now, Hal stated as he adjusted his lab coat and put several tools into a bag to take back to the bridge. I understand, Doctor. Enoch spoke into his helm. I will answer any questions you may have. Hal nodded and began to walk towards the door. He stopped when Enoch spoke again. Doctor. Yes, Enoch, he said, turning to face to construct. Please be careful. Enoch's voice carried a tone of worry which took Hal off guard. I will, Enoch, he said, tapping the crown. You'll be with me the whole time. With that he left the cargo hold and made his way to the bridge. The bridge was bathed in the pale red light of emergency lights. All of the bridge crew sat silently at their stations, diligently working on individual tasks. The semicircular bridge was absent of deck hands. At all of the station consoles sat the respective officers, and at their side stood a solitary assistant prepared to do whatever was needed of them. Commander Altus stood in front of his command throne watching the viewport and the holovid map, his focus not wavering from the steady stream of data being fed into the mapping. The small grey speck of planet Beta had grown larger over the past several hours, and with the help of Enoch and Dr. Bondi, the mapping had been updated. The map now showed 2 moons and several dozen smaller asteroid-sized hunks of rock in various levels of orbit around the planet. Commander Altus processed all of this information as it came, looking for any sign of hostile intent from the planet or the surrounding environment. In just a few short hours they would be in high orbit around the planet and would have a much better scan of the terrain and ground level of the planet. Dr. Bondi stood next to the holotable in the middle of the room communicating with Enoch. Altus couldn't hear what he was saying to the AI, but he didn't really care. He needed to stay focused on the task at hand. Out of the corner of his eye he noticed that Sergeant Salg had come onto the bridge. The gruff sergeant stood off to the side of the bridge conferring with one of his security voidsmen. They spoke in hushed tones, and when they had finished the security voidsman left the bridge in a hurry. Sergeant Salg approached Altus with the same stoic expression he always wore. "Sir, I think we have an issue." Sergeant Salg whispered from the side of the command dais. "What would that be, Sergeant?" Altus turned to look at his bridge sergeant. "Sir, in the case of us being boarded, we are going to have a problem. We don't have the men to repel a boarding party of anything larger than a strike team." Altus turned back to the vidfeed and stared at it intently. He hoped that it didn't come to that. "Well, Sergeant," he replied, "let us pray that we don't let that happen." The sergeant nodded knowingly, his expression never changing. Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Bondi's approach. "Sergeant," Dr. Bondi said, nodding to Salg in acknowledgement before turning his attention to Altus. "Doctor," Salg replied before turning and walking back to his security voidman. "Commander, the enhancements Enoch made to the long and short range sensors have greatly increased our perception of the planet." Dr. Bondi seemed distracted, whether it was the approach to the planet or something else Altus couldn't say. "I've noticed, Doctor, your help as well as Enoch's has been greatly appreciated." Dr. Bondi nodded several times in quick succession. He wiped his hands on his lab coat, smearing off a thin layer of grease and dust onto his coat. "I'll know more in a few hours when we get closer to the planet, but I have already picked up signs of radiation emanating from a spot in the northern hemisphere on the largest continent." "What does that mean?" Altus asked, his brow furrowing. "What kind of radiation would be strong enough to reach all the way out here?" "I'm not sure yet," Dr. Bondi retorted sourly. "The radiation is too weak to be picked up in its entirety right now, but soon we will have a better idea. Enoch isn't even sure what it is. It's baffling." Altus watched the doctor carefully for a few moments before replying. The doctor's shoulders were hunched, and his head hung like a man that had a heavy weight burdening him. The wrinkles on his face seemed to be deeper and more set than when he had first met him, his eyes more hollow. "What I don't understand, Doctor," Altus began, "is why a radiation signature would be coming from a solitary source. It has to be a created object." "That was my thoughts as well, Commander. Whatever life is down there has created something that is putting off a lot of radiation. It can't be a natural phenomenon." The doctor fidgeted with the sleeve of his lab coat as he spoke. "Well," Altus huffed, "I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the sensors pick up on our arrival." 2 hours went by without incident, with all crew members on high alert. The planet grew in the viewport until it became a large grey and green marble. The lower part of the visible continent was shrouded by cloud coverage. A lightning storm was visible even from this distance in the void. The planet was larger than terra firma by several scales of magnitude, and its northern and southern poles were covered in frost and ice. From the side of the planet visible to the viewport there appeared to be one large continent that was a lush and vibrant green. The ocean wasn't the deep blue that would be expected with water, but instead it was a blue-grey, pale and dull, seemingly devoid of saturation. A beeping tone sounded from the center of the bridge. The holotable had a new light on the map of the planet. It had appeared near the northern pole, approximately 290 kilometers from the magnetic North Pole, near the edge of the ocean. The blip on the map showed a massive radiation spike at that location. "Enoch, can you isolate the energy signal and figure out what kind of radiation that is?" Commander Altus asked. It was strange asking questions with nobody there to ask them to. "Of course, Commander Altus," Enoch replied, scanning now. "How long do you think it will take to run those scans?" Altus asked, turning to Dr. Bondi. "I have completed the scans and filtered the relevant data, Commander. Enoch answered before Dr. Bondi could even open his mouth. "Aye. Thank you, Enoch." Altus's eyebrows raised and the surprise in his voice was audible. Dr. Bondi just looked at him, smiled a knowing smile and shook his head. "You're welcome, Commander Altus. The radiation signal does not appear in any records I have access to. Without a ground sample I am unable to determine its type or origin. I can say that its origin is not human in origin." Dr. Bondi spoke up, his voice wavering. "Commander, I think it may be prudent to take a shuttle down to the surface and research this site." "No, absolutely not," Altus said with a wave of his hand. "I'm not sending a crew to investigate a strange radiation signal on an unknown planet with the possibility of hostile intelligent life. Doctor, Commander, I'm detecting lush floral life and small pockets of organic life forms, possibly moving in herds which suggest beasts or animals of some sort." Enoch stated. "That is even more of a reason to stay away from this place." Altus exclaimed, exasperation creeping into his voice. "Commander, if I may." Dr. Bondi spoke up after clearing his throat. "I may have an idea that might benefit all of us." "Oh?" Altus asked questioningly. "I'm all ears, Doctor, but I think you know what my answer will be." Dr. Bondi slid his glasses to the hook of his nose and pinched the bridge of his nose and closed his eyes. "Please just hear me out, Commander. I can go down to the surface, just me, and I can take Enoch with me." "And what happens when something goes wrong? Who is going to be there to pull you out?" Altus asked, accusation heavy in his tone. "No one," Dr. Bondi said, more as a statement of fact than as anything. "That way you don't lose anything. If I fail and something is wrong, you lose nothing. But, if I am right, we make the most important discovery in human history." Dr. Bondi's voice was wavering and he looked as if he were on the verge of tears. Altus stared at the doctor as a wave of uncertainty washed over him. His brow furrowed and he crossed his arms over his chest. He looked around the bridge at the crew and thought about their lives. Would he take the chance of risking their lives just to make history? That seemed like a terrible gamble to make on the off chance that they all didn't get killed. "Sir, with all due respect," Sergeant Saug began, "I think that the doctor is right. I think we need to investigate this." "Oh, not you too." Altus moaned in irritation. This was getting out of hand. Humanitas. Super. Omnia. Sergeant Saug stated ominously, a grave tone in his voice. Altus started to speak, but those three words stopped him immediately. "Humanity above all," Altus said in a hushed whisper. "The motto of the UCIP." Altus wanted nothing more than to ignore those three little words, but he couldn't get past it. His duty was to put humanity above everything else. That meant putting the expansion of humanity above all else and at any cost. "Fine," he said with a sigh. "We will mount an expedition to the planet and investigate what is going on down there. But," he paused, taking a breath, "we go in force and we do it for the purposes of setting up a colony." "Understood." He looked around the bridge and uncrossed his arms. He put his hands on his hips and glared out at the bridge and made eye contact with every member of the bridge crew. When he finally spoke, he spoke with a steely resolve. "Prepare the security forces and prep the shuttles and gunships. We leave in 24 hours."